Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. I will get to response to the comments that the priest made about salvation. Probably do that after this segment. So the last segment of this hour, we will probably address that. Now, one of the issues that we've been following here on Focal Point right along is this business about our engagement in Syria. What's going on in Syria? You've got a civil war that's taking place there. I've got a story from the Daily Caller today, and our next caller, we're going to talk about this with our guest, our next guest who's with us on our decision maker line. Got a column today in the Daily Caller that features some comments by a man by the name of Jonathan Spire that basically says, look, there are no such thing as moderate rebels in Syria. That even this Free Syrian Army is filled with people who believe a Muslim Brotherhood Islamist, jihadist ideology. He says you may have some external structures that appear to be moderate in nature, but you get to the rebels, the forces on the ground, the guys that are actually prosecuting this effort to topple Assad, almost without exception. He says the rebel forces themselves are Muslim Brotherhood soaked, that kind of ideology and that kind of mentality. So with us to discuss some of that is Stephen Andrew Missick. Stephen is associate pastor at King of Saints Church in Cleveland, Texas. And Stephen, you have been to Syria. We want to talk to you about that. So welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good to have you on, Stephen. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is you've actually been to Syria. You have been to Damascus. So share a little bit with us about what your experience, what took you to Syria, to Damascus, and kind of what you've observed while you were there and what kind of light you can shed on what's taking place there right now.
All right, I went to Syria to visit the Christian minority there. Syria was about 12% Christian, but with this violence going there, of course, it's causing a lot of Christians to flee the country. But I was really interested in some villages where Aramaic is still spoken. Aramaic is one of the languages of the Bible. It's a language spoken by Jesus Christ. I was very fascinated by that. So I visited an Aramaic-speaking village outside of Damascus, which is called Malula.
Yeah, and I wanted specifically to ask you about that because that's been in the news.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. If you get my book, it's called The Words of Jesus in the Original Aramaic, that village is on the cover of the book. And I've been there many times. I actually wrote some of the book at the village. That's not the only place Aramaic is spoken in Syria, however. There's also, out in the eastern region, there's the Assyrian Christians, and they speak Aramaic. But, it's a Christian village. They still speak a dialect of Aramaic. It's very nice, tranquil place. But it's really just shocking that now you got Islamic militants running around just shooting everything up. So it's really distressing to see that.
Well, and they've taken over Malula. I'm looking at a story here from Breitbart News, the village of Malula, and this is the village, Stephen, where you visited and repeatedly wrote part of your book. The village of Malula has been taken over by Syrian rebels associated with Al-Qaeda, who have stormed the Christian center and offered local Christians a choice, conversion or death. A resident of the town said the rebels shouted Allahu Akbar as they moved through the village and proceeded to assault Christian homes and churches. They shot and killed people. Said one eyewitness, I saw the militants grabbing 5 villagers and threatening them, saying, either you convert to Islam or you will be beheaded.
Well, the prior regime, the regime is in power now, the Assad family, they're not good guys either. They're closely associated with Iran, and they support a lot of Islamic terrorist organizations. And while I was there, they have massive mosque building. They're settling people in the Christian villages. But the majority of Christians do feel safer under the Assad rule because they're given limited amount of religious freedom. They're not overtly persecuted by the government for their religious beliefs. Now, if the Muslim Brotherhood takes over, we already see what's happening. And I believe that it's important for Christians in the United States to know what's going on in the Islamic world, and we should be supporting our brothers and sisters in Christ. You know, I served in Iraq as a soldier and as a chaplain, and unfortunately, a lot of the Assyrian Christians, that's their homeland, northern Iraq, and the number of Christians in northern Iraq has declined by, it's probably just one half of what it used to be, maybe even one third. And I went to there's a lot of Aramaic Christians immigrating over here. I just went to an Iraqi Christian church, and they're getting hundreds of people every month fleeing this. And you hear these stories, how that Muslims come into a Christian village and say, either convert or die. You have 24 hours. And a lot of these Aramaic-speaking Christians, these Assyrian Christians, have to flee with just the clothes on their back. So this is it's a disaster. But there's something else we need to be mindful of. We are seeing something that's been going on for 1,400 years. This type of persecution is something that's gone on since Muslim armies first arrived in the region. And I think it's very important for us to understand that. But we're witnessing things that are, if you read the history books of the Church of the East, like I've studied their history, the Coptic and the Assyrian churches, and this is nothing new, this level of persecution. But we need to speak out about it, and we also need to give. There's an organization called the Barnabas Fund that supports, and I've really been impressed by their work.
Yeah, they do good work.
I've also worked with the Coptic Christians, and a couple of years ago, this was under Mubarak. They're killing all the pigs on the false pretense of the swine flu, and a lot of Coptic Christians are poor, and they're subsistence farmer, and they just went in there and they slaughtered all their livestock. What are these people supposed to do? How are they supposed to survive? Because Muslims aren't eating pork, so the Christians are eating that. And Barnabas Fund went in there and gave them like recycling machines, something so they could start their lives all over again. So we need to be aware, we need to pray, and we need to speak out. And I'm concerned about what's going to happen if we get involved. We don't want to see the Muslim Brotherhood take over.
Well, and that's kind of my question for you, Stephen. I think the first thing, to go back to what you're saying, I think it's important for our listening audience to understand that what you said about Assad, that he's not a good guy, he's a brutal dictator, but the alternative, the Muslim Brotherhood, is much worse. And what I'm hearing you say, Stephen, if you were to ask the Syrian Christians, if you had to choose between Assad and these Muslim Brotherhood-inspired rebels, if those were your only two choices, that would be a no-brainer. They would prefer Assad because they had some limited amount of protection under him.
Right. There are some exceptions, and until this, well, in the beginning of the revolution that we see going on right now, there were pro-democracy forces, but we should have supported that. But the American government didn't. We were disengaged, and now the Muslim extremists have moved into the forefront, so now it's a very dangerous situation. But I think another thing that people need to know or to remember, like I lived in Damascus, and this is where Paul had his Damascus Road experience, going to and there's the wall, the street called Straight is still there. The house of Ananias is still there. It's a little shrine. They have the place where Paul was led over by over the wall in the basket is still there. And these are the oldest Christian communities. This is where Christianity began, in Egypt and Syria. These people, some of these Christians, the Assyrians, these Christians in Malula, they still speak the very language of Jesus Christ. And if we just stand back and let them just be slaughtered and disappear, it's going to just be gone forever. And it's really
it seems to me
that the church survived this long.
And let me ask this question, Stephen. Let me ask this question about kind of our strategy there, because what our president wants to do is he is concerned about Assad. He wants to degrade Assad's ability to deploy these chemical weapons, but just in general to degrade his military capacity. So he's looking at Assad as the guy that has to be stopped there. But what I'm seeing here from what you're saying, you look at the Christian minority that's in the country of Syria, and the more effort we expend trying to degrade Assad's capability, the more, in essence, we strengthen the hand of al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, whose intentions really, if they're given free rein, are to exterminate the Christian minority in Syria. So the more we do to stop Assad, the more help we are giving to the enemies of Christianity.
Unfortunately, it does seem that way, but I think that we need to remember who this Assad regime is. And one thing that really disturbed me when I was in Syria, in some ways, Syria is a beautiful country. I love being there. Damascus, I enjoyed Damascus, going to Malula. There are some beautiful ruins of the Roman Empire, actually the Arab Empire of Palmyra. There's a Crusader castle. It's perfectly preserved. I mean, it's a nice country. But they had this evil regime, and just walking the streets and seeing the level of anti-Semitism was disturbing. And I think that, we don't want to go in there and bring the Muslim Brotherhood into power, but we need to remember Assad's not a good guy. And Assad, this Bashar Assad, he's responsible for the assassination of Hariri, the president of Lebanon, in 2005. And it's believed that Marine bombing back in 1982 was carried out by his father, Hafez Assad. So it's not like
and so what I hear you saying, Steve, there really aren't any good guys to get behind in Syria. There are no good guys there. Let me ask you one last question. Got about a minute left. What we obviously want to pray we can give to organizations like Barnabas Fund, but what do you think, Stephen? Is there anything that you think that our government could do that would help the Christian community in Syria?
I think that the government should just speak about these issues. We don't really even talk about them. I'll give you an example. When I served in Iraq, and we wouldn't do enough to protect the Christians. It's like, we don't want to give them any preferential treatment. What we need to do, I don't have a lot of time, but we need to seriously deal with the issue of Islamic extremism. And we need to marginalize this point of view. We're afraid of taking Islamic extremism head on. And we need to say, look, the Christians there should have equal rights as citizens and not be second-class or discriminated against. The government should at least speak out for universal human rights for Christians, for them to maintain their life, to practice their religion, and to preserve the language of Jesus Christ. But I think Christians in America also need to learn more about our brothers and sisters in Christ over there. That's why I have my book. If you want to learn about Aramaic and the Assyrian people, the book is entitled The Words of Jesus in the Original Aramaic. The Words of Jesus in the Original Aramaic by Stephen Andrew Missick. And where can folks get a copy of that book? Well, you can get that, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any major bookseller. Terrific. Okay, give us the name. Give us the name one more time, Stephen. Make sure people get it. The Words of Jesus. The Words of Jesus in the Original Aramaic. It's just an introduction. It's not a phrase book, dictionary. It's just places where you see Aramaic in the Bible and just general information about those Christian communities over there. God bless you, Stephen. Thanks for being with us.